The wind howled through the narrow mountain pass, rattling the worn-out compartments of the old passenger train as it snaked its way through the highlands. Most of the travelers aboard were quiet. Families returning home, students headed back to school, lone passengers lost in thought. Among them was a woman, young, with tear-streaked cheeks and arms wrapped tightly around her infant daughter. She sat in the last car, farthest from the engine, away from curious eyes. Nobody knew her name. Some assumed she was running from someone. Others thought she was just tired like the rest of them. Her clothes were simple, and she didn't speak to anyone. The only sound that came from her seat was the occasional soft whimper of the baby. The train had left the station 2 hours ago, but the weather was getting worse. Thick fog settled over the track. The conductor, a seasoned old man named Pavel, had never seen visibility drop this fast. He walked through the cars, checking on the passengers, pausing slightly as he passed the woman in the last car. She didn't look up. No one heard the scream. It wasn't loud. It was more like a yelp, quick, sharp, and swallowed by the wind. By the time the conductor returned to the rear, the last car was empty. The young woman had vanished. So had the baby. They searched the train, thinking perhaps she had wandered to the restroom or gone to another car, but she was gone. Some thought she must have jumped. Others feared she had been taken. All anyone could confirm was that one moment she was there, and the next she was gone. An emergency stop was made, but the dense fog and harsh terrain made it impossible to search thoroughly. The authorities were notified. Hours passed. Nothing was found. But miles away, near the base of a slope that bordered the rail line, a farmer named Annika was out feeding her chickens when she heard an odd cry. At first, she thought it was one of the goats. Then again, no. It was different. A sharp, desperate wail. She followed the sound through the fog toward the edge of her property, and there, lying in a tangle of brush, wrapped in a tattered jacket and tucked inside a woven basket, was a baby. No one else around, no footprints, no sign of how it got there. Just the infant, alive, blinking up at her as if this place was exactly where it was meant to be. Who had placed her there? And how had she survived the impossible? Annika stood frozen for a moment, staring at the child. The baby was impossibly calm now, as if the wailing had never happened. Her chest rose and fell in even rhythm, tiny fingers curling around nothing, lips puckered in sleep. "What in heaven's name?" Annika whispered. She knelt beside the basket, her hands trembling as she checked for injuries. Not a bruise, not a scratch. The baby was whole, untouched, except for a faint patch of soot on her blanket, like she had traveled through something smoky or metallic. The woman looked up instinctively toward the steep hill rising behind her land, and beyond that, the train tracks shrouded in fog. The realization hit like thunder. She must have come from the train. Annika carried the baby inside, wrapped her in a woolen blanket, and called the local police. The authorities were baffled. No missing persons had been reported in this area. No signs of trespassing. The baby hadn't been abandoned at a hospital, church, or shelter, just here on a quiet farm at the foot of the mountain. Word spread fast. "Miracle baby found in basket," the papers declared. No clue how she got there. Locals came by with clothes and milk. Journalists asked for interviews. Annika, private by nature, refused most of them. She had no answers, only a conviction growing stronger by the day that this child had been sent to her. Across town, the railway company ran its own investigation. They found damage to the railing in the last car, a bent window latch and scuffed metal, like something heavy had been shoved through in a hurry. When they questioned passengers, most had nothing to offer. But one teenage boy remembered something strange. He'd seen the woman looking frantic minutes before the train hit the pass. She was clutching the baby, crying softly. He looked away, embarrassed. When he glanced back, she was gone. The last thing he heard before the train whistled into the fog was what he thought was a prayer or a cry. Days passed. The woman was never found. No ID, no personal effects, no relatives came forward. Authorities eventually stopped asking questions. But Anika didn't stop searching. Not for answers, but for meaning. She named the girl Leni. Years passed. Leni grew up with curious eyes and an old soul. Sometimes she would sit under the trees and stare at the hills in silence. At 6, she told Anika, "The sky whispered me down to you." Anika smiled at her words, though they made her chest ache. Was it luck that the baby survived? Fate? Divine timing? Or had a desperate mother, with seconds to act, done the impossible? One day, Leni found an old article about the incident buried in a box in the attic. She read it slowly, lips moving without sound. Then she turned to Anika and asked, "Was that me?" "Yes," Anika whispered. "That was you, little light." Leni said nothing. She walked to the window and for a long time just watched the ridge where the train had passed all those years ago. That night, Leni couldn't sleep. She sat upright in bed, her blanket tucked beneath her chin, eyes wide open as moonlight spilled across the wooden floorboards. The newspaper article lay beside her. Faded ink, yellowing paper, a photo of the basket she had been found in. The caption read, "A miracle in the mountains." But was it just luck, or something more? The next morning, Leni asked to visit the ridge above the farm. Anika hesitated. She hadn't gone up there in years. The place still carried the weight of mystery and a whisper of tragedy. But she nodded. Maybe Leni needed this. Maybe they both did. The climb was harder than Anika remembered. The air got thinner, the path narrower, but Leni seemed almost drawn, as if pulled by a memory she couldn't possibly have. She walked ahead, sure-footed and silent, like she was following footsteps only she could see. When they reached the ridge, they stood together in silence. The old tracks were rusty now, no longer in use. Trees had started to reclaim the land. Nature was slowly erasing what man had built. But something still lingered, a quiet, pulsing energy, like the land itself remembered what happened that day. Leni walked to a specific spot and crouched, brushing aside tall grass. There, half buried in the soil, was a small metal clasp, worn, bent, probably part of the window mechanism. She picked it up gently. "I think this is where she did it," Leni said softly. Anika didn't have to ask who she was. They stayed until sunset, the sky turning amber and gold. On the way down, Anika asked her, "Do you ever wish you knew who she was?" Leni thought for a long time before answering. "I think I do know. Not her name, but her heart." She touched her chest. "I feel her all the time." Years passed. Leni became a writer, her stories often circling themes of loss, hope, and mysterious grace. Her most famous book was a fictionalized account of her origin titled The Window Beyond the Ridge. It opened with the line, "I was given away not in despair, but in love that couldn't stay." The book touched people, not just because of the writing, but because it carried something true, an echo of something ancient, a whisper that reminded readers that even in our darkest moments, there's a hand guiding, a path opening, a miracle waiting to be seen. At the end of the book's film adaptation, just before the credits roll, the screen fades to black and the following words appear. To the ones who leap without wings and land where they were meant to be. Thank you for watching The Baby Thrown from the Train. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to help us tell more stories like this, of grace, timing, and things that can't be explained, only felt.